The air in the old lawyer's office was thick with the smell of dust and old money. I sat on the cracked leather couch, knees pressed together, watching my older brother, David, puff out his chest. The reading of our father's will was a foregone conclusion, a chore. Dad had made his preferences as clear as the Wall Street Journal's stock ticker. David, the golden son, the finance prodigy, the heir. Me, Eliza, the afterthought, the artsy daughter who played with colors instead of building empires. Mr. Henderson adjusted his spectacles, his voice a dry rustle of paper. To my son, David Arthur Mitchell, I bequeath the entirety of my liquid assets, the primary portfolio, and the controlling shares in Mitchelson Holdings. He paused, letting the weight of it settle. A smug smile stretched across David's face. It was a smile I'd seen my whole life. The sum is valued at approximately $10 million. There it was, 10 million. A number that could buy freedom, security, a lifetime of creation. A number that, to me, was just a reminder of how little my father valued my world. David gave a slight, magnanimous nod, as if accepting a mildly interesting business proposal. Mr. Henderson's eyes, pale and sharp behind his glasses, flicked to me. To my daughter, Eliza Jane Mitchell, I bequeath the property known as Whispering Pines, located in the Catskill Mountains, New York, along with a trust for its upkeep, and the contents therein. David couldn't stifle a soft, condescending chuckle. The creepy old cabin? Good luck with that, Lisa. Hope you like chopping wood and dealing with raccoons. He leaned over, oozing faux sympathy. If you need a loan to fix the roof, you know where to find me. I said nothing. The cabin. A place of childhood summers that ended too abruptly when Dad decided David needed structured enrichment, and I needed to stop daydreaming in the woods. A place I'd both loved and lost. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat with a force that silenced David's snickering. There is, however, a codicil, a condition. He focused on David now, his expression unreadable. The $10 million bequest, David, is contingent upon you accepting joint custody, so to speak. David's brow furrowed. Joint custody of what? A stock certificate. Of your sister, Mr. Henderson said, the words dropping like stones. The room went utterly still. David's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. What does that mean? It means, the lawyer continued, reading directly from the document, that the funds are released in quarterly installments over the next 5 years. Each installment is conditional upon Eliza's verified well-being and her reasonable satisfaction with your guardianship. You are to provide her with a primary residence, ensure her safety, and address her legitimate needs. Failure to do so, as determined by an independent trustee, results in the freezing of the assets and their eventual redistribution to Eliza's trust. This is insane, David exploded, leaping to his feet. She's 27. I'm not her babysitter. This has to be a joke. It is not a joke. Your father was very specific. He believed Eliza's temperament required stability and guidance, which he felt you, as the head of the family, could provide. He worried her artistic pursuits left her vulnerable. The insult was so vintage Arthur Mitchell that it took my breath away, but the shock was drowned by a sudden, roaring realization. David needed me. For the first time in our lives, my golden brother needed my cooperation to get what he wanted. I stood up slowly, smoothing my simple black dress. Well, David, I said, my voice quieter but steadier than I felt. Looks like you just bought yourself a sister, and a pretty expensive one at that. The transition was as cold and sleek as David's Manhattan high-rise. He installed me in a guest room with a view of the steel-end glass canyon of the city, a room that felt like a luxury hotel suite, impersonal and temporary. Our interactions were transactions. Here's your allowance from the upkeep trust, he'd say, sliding an envelope across the marble breakfast bar. Try not to spend it all on, what do you buy? Pastels? Oil paints mostly, I'd murmur, taking the envelope. He laid down rules. No wild parties. No unsavory artist friends in the apartment. I had to inform him if I was leaving the city. He installed a security system that felt more like a monitoring device. I was a privileged prisoner, a bird in a gilded cage funded by my own inheritance's trust. I spent my days wandering the city, sketching in Washington Square Park, visiting galleries that made my heart ache with a mix of inspiration and despair. I was living in the epicenter of the art world, yet I felt further from my own art than ever in that sterile apartment. The urge to paint, to really pour something onto a canvas, was stifled by the oppressive sense of being watched, judged, and managed. The first crack appeared 2 months in. I'd signed up for a life drawing class in a worn-down studio in Brooklyn. The model didn't show, and the instructor, a vibrant woman named Mila with ink-stained fingers, asked if anyone would volunteer. On a whim, I did. For 3 hours, I was Eliza Mitchell, the dependent sister. I was a shape, a form, a study in light and shadow. It was terrifying and exhilarating. I came home after midnight, my hair smelling of charcoal and shared wine. David was waiting, pacing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights etching his angry silhouette. "Where the hell have you been?" he snapped. "You didn't answer your phone. My security guy said you went to some hole in Brooklyn." "I was at an art class," I said, exhaustion stripping my voice of defense. "Art class?" he scoffed. "Sitting naked for strangers, from what I heard." The humiliation burned. "It's not like that, it's a legitimate. I don't care what it is. It stops. You want to draw apples in your room. This," he waved a hand at me, "this bohemian nonsense reflects poorly. I have clients and investors. What if someone saw you?" That was the core of it. Image. My existence was a risk to his brand. The quarterly payment was due for verification in a week. I saw the calculation in his eyes. The annoyance of dealing with me versus the first $2.5 million installment. Annoyance lost. "Fine," I whispered, the fight gone. But something hardened in me that night. A resolve. He saw me as a liability, a clause in a contract. I needed to become a condition he couldn't so easily dismiss. The next quarter, I didn't fight the rules. I embraced them. I asked for things, reasonable, legitimate needs, as per the will. I requested a dedicated studio space, citing the dust and fumes of oil painting as unsuitable for his pristine apartment. Grudgingly, he rented a small, raw space in a building in Long Island City. It had exposed brick and poor heating, but it was mine. I asked for an allowance increase to cover higher quality materials, framing my request in the language he understood. Asset development, portfolio building. He agreed, seeing it as a manageable expense. In that cold studio, I began to paint again. Not the polite, pretty things I'd done before. I poured my frustration, my loneliness, the claustrophobia of my gilded life onto the canvas. Dark, swirling forests that echoed the Catskills around the cabin. Figures trapped in geometric skyscraper prisons. Portraits where the eyes held a challenge. I worked with a frantic, focused energy I'd never known. I also began to research. Not art, but our father's business. Whispering Pines, the trust. With Mila's help, we'd become friends despite David's disapproval. I found a sharp, young lawyer who looked over the will's trust documents. Her eyes widened. "Eliza, this upkeep trust for the cabin, it's not just for fixing shutters. The payments are substantial. And look at this clause. It allows for environmental and historical preservation. This is a powerful tool. What's at this cabin?" I didn't know. I hadn't been back since I was 12. The next quarterly meeting with Mr. Henderson and the trustee, a stern woman named Mrs. Banks, was different. David reported on my well-being with the air of a project manager, delivering a satisfactory status update. When Mrs. Banks turned to me, I didn't just say I'm fine. "David has been adequately providing for my physical needs," I began. David sat a little straighter, smug. "However, for my emotional and professional well-being, I have a request, a need. I wish to spend time at Whispering Pines, my property, to paint. The city is stifling my creativity, which is central to my identity and therefore my well-being." David's head whipped toward me. "Don't be ridiculous. That place is a 5-hour drive. It's falling apart. It's not safe. The trust provides for its upkeep and my safety," I said calmly, sliding a copy of the clause my lawyer had highlighted toward Mrs. Banks. "It's a legitimate need. Denying me access to my own property, which could serve as a productive retreat, would, I believe, be detrimental to my well-being." I saw the flicker in Mrs. Banks's eyes. She was a pragmatist, but the will's language was clear. David saw it too. The blood money was on the line again. "Fine," he gritted out, "but I'm sending a security detail, and you'll check in daily." Whispering Pines wasn't a cabin. I'd forgotten its scale. It was a sprawling, rustic lodge of dark wood and stone, nestled in a private clearing of dense forest, overlooking a deep, glassy lake. It was majestic, lonely, and yes, a little eerie. The wind did whisper through the towering pines, a constant, sighing conversation. David's security guy, a silent man named Ray, helped me carry my supplies inside, then retreated to a small guest house on the property, a silent sentinel. The first few days, I just explored. The house was filled with relics of a past life. My mother's faded watercolors of wildflowers, pictures, a talent I never knew she had. My own clumsy childhood drawings pinned to a corkboard in what was once my room. My father's ledgers and hunting trophies gathering dust in the study. It was a museum of a broken family. But the land was alive. I started painting outside, my canvases filling with the deep greens, the grays of the rock faces, the brilliant flash of a blue jay. The oppressive weight of the city began to lift. Here, my art changed again. It became less angry, more searching, deeper. One rainy afternoon, poking around the study, I found a false panel at the back of an old desk. My heart hammered. Inside was not a stack of cash or a secret diary, but a slim portfolio of architectural plans and land surveys. They weren't for the house. They were for the land itself. Hundreds of acres of pristine forest, and stamped across them, in bold red letters, MITCHELSON Holdings Development Potential Project TIMBRHAVEN. With trembling hands, I found the most recent document, a proposal dated just 6 months before my father's death, to sell the entire parcel, including the cabin, to a luxury resort developer. The deal had fallen through at the last minute. The buyer had backed out due to unforeseen title complexities. Me. My father hadn't left me the cabin out of sentimental affection. He'd left it to me because he couldn't sell it. He'd tied it up in a trust, maybe hoping I'd fail to maintain it, forcing a sale. Or maybe he'd had a last-minute flicker of conscience, knowing David would bulldoze it for profit. And David knew. He knew the real value wasn't just in the 10 million. It was in this land. Once the 5-year guardianship was over, once he had his full inheritance, he'd have the leverage to pressure me, or simply wait for me to fail. The cabin was the true prize, worth far more than 10 million once developed. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. I wasn't a burden. I was an obstacle. The final, inconvenient piece in my father and brother's grand financial plan. Ray, the security guard, found me sitting on the floor of the study, the plans spread around me. His eyes, usually so blank, registered the documents. For a second, I saw not a hired minder, but a man who might know these woods. "You knew," I said, my voice hollow. He hesitated, then gave a single nod. "Your father and brother had surveyors up here last year. They made a lot of promises to the local town council about jobs and revenue. Then it went quiet, because my father died and left it to me. Looks that way." I looked up at him. "Are you here to protect me, Ray, or to watch me?" He held my gaze. "My job was to ensure your well-being and report on your activities. But ma'am, I grew up in these parts. That resort would have killed this lake, changed everything. A potential ally or a double agent? I couldn't be sure, but I had the truth now. When I returned to the city, I was different. I wasn't the reactive, wounded sister anymore. I had a purpose. I used my allowance and my studio not just to paint, but to plan. I networked, not in David's financial circles, but in environmental law and land conservation. I had my lawyer dig deeper. We discovered that the upkeep trust was not only flush, but could be used for legal defense of the property. The next quarterly review arrived. David was agitated. The 4th installment was the biggest yet. He needed it to close a personal deal, a yacht he'd bragged about. He'd gotten complacent, thinking I was pacified by my little art retreats. Mrs. Banks asked her usual questions. David gave his usual glossy report. Then she turned to me. "Eliza, how have you been?" I smiled, a calm, poised smile I'd been practicing. "I've been very well, thank you." David has been most accommodating. In fact, his provision of security allowed me to safely discover something fascinating at Whispering Pines. I slid a single sheet of paper, a copy of the Timber Haven cover page, across the table. David's face went ashen. "What is this? Where did you get that?" "In my asterisk house, on my asterisk land." I kept my eyes on Mrs. Banks. "It appears a significant part of my brother's motivation for his diligent guardianship is the future development potential of the property I inherited, a property he and my father tried to sell. This casts his care in a new light, don't you think? It suggests a conflict of interest that may not align with the spirit of well-being the will intends." The room erupted. David was on his feet, shouting about trespassing in his father's papers, about my paranoia and ingratitude. Mr. Henderson tried to calm him. Mrs. Banks studied the document, her face a mask of professional concern. "This is a serious allegation, Eliza," she said. "It's not an allegation, it's a fact. The development plans exist. The failed sale is a matter of record. My question is whether David's actions are those of a concerned guardian or a future developer waiting for a legal clock to run out." Mrs. Banks looked at David, his composure shattered. "This requires further review. The quarterly installment will be placed in escrow pending an investigation into potential conflicts and the authenticity of David's provision of care. David looked at me then, not with anger, but with a kind of stunned, icy hatred. He had seen me as a line item, a problem to be managed. Now I was a strategic opponent, and I had just cost him his yacht and potentially everything. The war was no longer cold, it was declared. He tried to tighten the screws, cutting off unnecessary expenses, claiming financial prudence. My lawyer and the trust pushed back. I moved more of my life to the cabin, using the trust money to properly restore it, not as a developer's fantasy, but as an artist's sanctuary and a protected ecological site. I started a series of paintings called The Inheritance, stark, beautiful, and foreboding landscapes that began to attract notice in the very galleries David's clients frequented. The final showdown came just before the last installment. David, desperate, came to the cabin himself. He found me on the porch, painting the sunset over the lake, Ray splitting wood a respectful distance away. "You've ruined everything," he said, his voice low and venomous. "You were always a drain. A sentimental, weak drain. Dad knew it. I should have just found a way to have you declared incompetent." I put my brush down, wiping my hands on a rag. "But you didn't. Because you're not as smart as you think you are, David. You only see value in what can be bought and sold. You never understood that this place, my art, it's a different kind of currency, one you can't control. I'll get the money, Eliza, and then I'll get this land. I'll tie you up in courts until you're begging me to take it." "Maybe," I said, looking out at the pines. "But you won't get it from me. And you've already lost something, haven't you? The easy win, the clean, perfect life where you have everything. You took the 10 million, David, and you got me. And I'm the one thing you can't leverage, can't bully, and can't ignore." He left, sputtering threats. But the fire in him was banked by fear. He'd played a financial game, and I'd changed the rules. The final trustee review was a formality. Mrs. Banks had done her investigation. The conflict was real. David received his final installment, but with a permanent stipulation. Any future attempt by him or his companies to purchase, develop, or influence the Whispering Pines property would result in legal penalties and a clawback of all inherited funds. It was a poison pill. He got his money, but the greater treasure was forever out of reach. I stand in my studio in the restored lodge, the light from the lake dancing on the finished canvases of The Inheritance. They're selling, to my quiet amazement. Not for 10 million, but for enough. Ray isn't my security guard anymore. He's the property manager and a friend. We're working with the local community to place a conservation easement on most of the land, protecting it forever. I think of David sometimes, in his glass tower, counting his money. He took the 10 million at the will reading. He thought it came with a passive, pathetic sister. He didn't know it came with a reckoning. It came with a woman who learned to fight back on a battlefield of her own choosing, using the tools of legacy, law, and the unshakable truth of what she valued. He got his fortune, and I, against all odds, found my freedom. And in these Whispering Pines, that is the only inheritance that ever truly mattered. Thanks for diving into Eliza's story with me. If you found a piece of your own resilience in her journey, consider this. The things they underestimate about you are often your greatest strengths. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales of secrets unveiled and quiet strength finding its voice. Until next time, keep searching for your own truth. It's out there, waiting to be claimed.